Hello, Ian. Hello from Ukraine. I'm very glad to meet you and to see you.
Me too. I'm very happy to meet you.
First of all, tell me please a little bit about your activities. Where do you live? What do you do, etc.?
So I'm a photographer, obviously. I live in Paris. I'm American. I also am French. I took the French nationality. Obviously, I must like it here, otherwise. And I've been living here for a long time. I was born in Europe, actually. I was born in Salzburg, in Austria, to American parents. And we went a lot around Europe, traveling and seeing and absorbing the culture here. And of course, when you're a little boy, they kind of drag you along, but so much sunk in of European culture that it was no problem for me to come back over here later in my life and stay. A lot of my American friends couldn't understand that, but I understood it. So I traveled a lot in Europe, and my father, who was an amateur photographer, one day when I was about 8, he put the camera around my neck and said, "Why don't you carry it? And if you want it, you can take a picture." So he helped me, and I started taking pictures like that. But when you're a little boy, you don't really dive into an interest like that. I was more interested in playing, so the camera was put away. And later, when I was in high school, we had moved back to California, and I was taking art classes. And one day I had an argument with my teacher, and he kicked me out and said, "Don't come back." So the only other options were welding, auto mechanic, and photography. And I said, "Photography, I'm interested." So I started taking the photography classes in high school and fell completely in love with photography, and just continued. I took all the classes possible. Then I went to college, and I continued taking photography classes, and I took journalism classes. So you had to write and take pictures. Then I applied to Art Center College of Design University in Los Angeles, where I studied film and photography. And there they pushed technique in your head for the first year, and then they let you do not exactly everything you want, but mostly. So I did film and I did photography, and after two and a half years, I graduated, and I went directly to New York to, conquer the Big Apple. And I was lucky enough to work almost right away for a lot of the magazines that I had hoped to work for, like Andy Warhol's Interview or Esquire or New York Times Magazine, Rolling Stone. And I started photographing famous people along with that. And so it was very gratifying. But as you might know, magazines pay very little money. It's all for the prestige. So I started looking for other kinds of jobs. I got nowhere with advertising in New York. They thought my photographs were too crazy. So I did a lot of album covers for jazz and for R&B. and I liked that very much, and that paid well. And I had some French photographer friends who said, Ian, if you want to do fashion photography, because I had mentioned it to them, he said, you got to go to Paris. That's where the fashion is. That's where real fashion is, and you'll learn so much more over there. So after saving some money, I moved to Paris. I didn't move. I came over to see if I could get work and get an agent to help me find work. And I did. I found an agent, and I started working for French magazines, doing fashion and portraits, which is more or less my specialty. And then I got the agent started getting me advertising work, which made me make some money. So I finally decided to move over here, left New York, cut down the bridge, and left. No, and absolutely no regrets, believe me. And I realized after 4 years in New York, having a great time doing the kind of work I wanted to do, that I was never going to be the workaholic. You know what that means?
Yes.
Crazy about work,
Mhm.
making lots of money. Because in New York, you have to make a lot of money because it's very expensive to live there correctly. So I had fun, did nice pictures, and I was ready to leave. And I never went back. Voila.
And you have worked on completely different projects in style, emotion, and presentation. How do you form the idea of implementing your projects for yourself? What inspires you?
Obviously, after having gone to a professional design photography school, you more or less know how to do just about everything technically. Uh, so after I decided to choose what I really liked to do, which was portraiture and some fashion and whatever. But obviously, when people propose you other kinds of jobs, um, where they let you express yourself, but they're also well paid, you do them. I mean, you are a photographer. No, you have an artist side and you have a professional photographer side. So it's not that I purposely separated them, but it just is, that's the way it is. On my personal work, it had to do with people you meet, situations you find, and sometimes you fall in love with the situation and you want to do a project about it. For instance, the circus. In fact, I had been hired um, by a producer who was bringing that circus to Germany, to Berlin. And it was also the producer of another artist that I had photographed. His name is Django Edwards. He's a clown, crazy clown. And so when I saw the circus and I photographed them, I thought, wow, this is beautiful. I gotta do more. So I asked the circus boss if I could do more pictures. And he says, well, I can't give you that permission. You have to ask them. So I got them together and asked them. And a lot of them looked at me like, another photographer wants to take our picture. So a few said, okay. So I started taking their picture. And when they started to see the contact sheets, they said, oh, wow, yeah, let's do more or whatever. So I followed them for 14 months all around Europe. And at the more or less at the end of that, we decided to do a traveling exhibition
Mhm.
with the circus. There was another tent just for the exhibition. And then the circus said, let's do a book. So that's the kind of opportunity you don't say no to. So we got a good designer and an editor, and we had the book printed, and then it was distributed in France and in England, and of course the circus sold it when they were performing. Then I did another project in the United States where I drove around the far west in a camping car photographing professional rodeo cowboys. That unfortunately never became a book, but I have the series here, and that was great fun. And then in 1981, my father came to visit me here in France and to meet my fiancée. And he asked me if I could take him to Normandy. And I said, to Normandy? I said, well, if you want some Calvados, the famous liquor, you can get it here. He said, no, 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 but I was in the war there and I want to see. And I went, oh, well, you never told me that. So we went there, and the greeting from the French people in Normandy was so warm and affectionate to these old warriors, let's say. And it was so moving that I started photographing him and all the other veterans and the people who were there. And it became a yearly thing. Every year on the 6th of June, I would go up there with or without my father. And it went on for 30 years, and it became a big exhibition in the Overlord Museum in Colville, and a book. And it's a continuing thing. Now, unfortunately, all the old veterans, like in Russia, they're leaving us, which is sad. But what I like is that the photographs, the portraits, and their stories live on. So future generations can know them through my photographs. And then the last book I published 2 years ago was a series I had done over 3 summers in the south of France in a swimming pool of underwater nudes. And I did a lot of experimentation, shooting film. It wasn't digital. Getting in and out of the pool, changing the film, etc. Coming back to Paris, developing it, looking at it. Oh, I should have done this. I should have done that. Going back down there. And I wanted to make the photographs almost like drawings, like charcoal drawings. So it's on film. It's no digital manipulation, on silver prints, except for the color. Voila. Those kind of projects, I usually spend a long time doing.
Great. Thank you.
At least a year.
And you have a very impressive track record of working in New York and Paris. How are the cities different from each other in terms of art and photography?
New York is obviously the art capital of the United States, and actually stole a lot of the glory of Paris, art glory, after World War II. A lot of artists had come to hide in New York from the Germans, and so that helped make the art scene in New York prosper. New York is a super energetic, fast running city, full of people wanting to be millionaires. But that wasn't my case. Paris is much more laid back, much more civilized, shall I say. And you can live better here for a lot less money than in New York. And I couldn't do the 200 mile an hour lifestyle in New York. It was too much for me. I didn't want to stay there any longer. 4 years was enough.
What cameras do you shoot now, and why? And I think it will be interesting to know about your previous cameras.
The camera my father put around my neck was an old IKOFLEX 6x6 camera. with nice Zeiss lenses, which of course, when you're 8 years old, you don't understand anything about that. But anyway, later when I was in high school, they make you learn photography on the hardest camera to use first, which was a speed graphic. You know, the old-fashioned press camera with a big sheet film.
Uh-huh.
So many things to remember that if you get a good picture, you did it. You know, there's so many things to remember. Anyway, then we went to Rolleiflex, and then we went to 35 millimeter, and already in high school and in beginning in college, my dream was to have a Hasselblad.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a job at a hospital, and I worked and worked and worked and got enough money to buy my first Hasselblad, which I love square format.
Mm.
And then I built it, you know, more lenses, more whatever. And so that's probably the workhorse camera that I used all during my professional career. And of course, when digital started coming in and people didn't want to pay for film and developing and scanning and retouching, whatever, I started using a Nikon, a high resolution camera. But you know, there was you were going to mention a long period, how it evolved from uh, great film, great cameras to the first digital cameras, which were big and heavy and slow and not very high resolution, to what it is today, which is very high resolution. It is perhaps even as good or better than film, but the texture is not the same. There's a beauty in the black and white or even in color of film that you can fool around with on the computer and try to get the same thing, but it's never the same. It's never the same. And there's something about getting your fingers wet and smelly from the chemicals that adds a charm to it. But most clients don't want to pay for it.
So now you shoot on Nikon.
Yes. But I use a lot of Zeiss lenses on it,
Mm-hmm.
which are even, you know, sharper and whatever.
But in your opinion, what are the prospects for popularization film in commercial photography?
Well, first of all, you have to have a client who, as you say, isn't as in a hurry to get the film, get the results, and they have to be willing to put the film and the development and everything into the budget. You know, it's not the photographer to pay all that; it's the client. Unless you make one big global price and then give it to them and say that includes everything. But that's kind of risky, you know. Obviously, with digital, you do all the work behind, and they don't pay any more money. You understand what I mean? When you develop the film, somebody else develops it if it's in color, and you or they scan it and whatever. The whole business changed. Many jobs were wiped away. The photo engraving, all that was finished. And unfortunately, because of modern technology, because of digital cameras, because of telephones, everybody is a photographer.
Yes.
Everybody wants their pictures on Instagram. Everybody wants their pictures everywhere. And they can do it with a click of a finger. You can throw your image out into cyberspace and it'll go around the planet in 15 seconds or less. And look, I'm on the internet. Everybody saw my picture. Voila. There's a kind of self gratitude that that's kind of, it's not the same thing as having your photograph in a magazine or whatever. It's different.
In your opinion, how has the world of photography changed over the past, I think, 30, 40 years?
Well, the digital, that's what changed it. Um, and
What about artistry, maybe?
well, let's talk about commercial photography first. Commercial photography for me went downhill because all of a sudden somebody who had a wanted to become a photographer would buy a camera, eventually have a hire an assistant to help him do the lighting because he has no idea how or whatever. It kind of it brought the quality down because a lot of people didn't learn photography, so they have to rely on an assistant or just doing. And a lot of what you see is just not good. It doesn't have the same quality or the same visual quality, not technical quality, but visual. And it's just c'est pas bien. That's the way I look at it. But there obviously are good photographers. There are good photographers. Obviously, working your way up the ladder of success and being well known is still difficult, perhaps more difficult, even though we're in an age where you can zap everybody. But when I went to New York, right out of college, I could call anybody on the phone and they would answer. Famous people that were the famous art director of New York Times or Vogue or whatever, they would actually come to the phone and talk to you. Sometimes they say, no, I have no time. Or they'd say, sure, come on in next Thursday. So you'd go in with your portfolio and you'd show them. And obviously they liked it or they didn't. But some of them would pull a job right out of the drawer and say, hey, go photograph Jean-Luc Godard next week because we're doing an article about him, and photograph him. And then you just show up and you meet the person, and right off the bat, you have to make some kind of a connection, which is sometimes easy, sometimes very difficult. With Jean-Luc Godard, for instance, he was in New York to his one of his films had just come out, and he was there to promote it. So actually, I had a rendezvous at his press agent's apartment, which was on the 25th floor, overlooking New York. So obviously, when I saw the view, I said, "Great, let's do the picture on the balcony." And he said, no, 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 no. I won't go out on the balcony. I said, because it's cold? He says, no, because I'm afraid of heights. And so I did not insist. So I said, let's have some coffee and talk a little bit before we do the photograph. And when the lady poured the coffee, I added cognac into his coffee. A lot. And he said to me, oh, il est bon ton café. Your coffee is very good. And I said, yes, it is. And after about a half an hour, I asked him again. And he said, okay. So we go out on the balcony and we did the photograph. But he didn't last long. He only lasted like 5 minutes. And then he said, I want to go back in. I'm getting nervous. So anyway, you have to create that kind of something that, right away, because you're thrown into a situation that you don't know the person, but you want to get a good shot of them. You want it to be your shot. You want it to be the way you look at the person. And you have to try to create that. And then obviously you have to choose out of all the photographs you did, the one that for you jumps off the light box or the contact, and almost yells at you, "I'm the one. I'm the photo. This is the one." A lot of people have trouble choosing their photograph, but for me, it's usually maximum between 1 or 3 photographs out of 50 or more photographs that you do. Because I never shot a lot of film, actually, on the 2¼ negative size, the 6.6. You go slower anyway. It's not like motor drive. Each picture is it's, and you try to make each one different. It's not. I shoot slow. I don't shoot fast.
Tell me please a little bit about your work with people of D-Day project. How do you manage to make them open up to you and remain so natural?
Well, obviously, they're not famous. They're not models. They're not used to having their photograph taken, first of all. And a lot of times with people like that, you take a picture and then they're ready to leave. And I said, no, wait, I'd like to take a few more photographs of you. He said, well, you took one. I said, well, let's do a few more, let's be generous. And because they don't realize the empathy, whatever that you want to try to create with them. And so they're very flattered. They're very happy, but they're almost embarrassed that I'm taking their photograph. And they're very humble people. And also getting them to speak, because I also record what they say so that I can write it again to put with their photographs. And I do not change anything in what they tell me. I only write down what they say. And so that it's real, it's not a journalistic point of view. It's them who, and they don't always, it's not easy for them to talk about the war. And many times they tend to go to almost funny things that happened to them during the war, because they'd rather remember the good things than the terrible things. It's very rare when they talk about horror or whatever, but they're very real and very, straightforward. I was actually offered to go to Russia to photograph veterans last year, last year. But with the COVID, I couldn't go, so I didn't.
And the last question, what advice would you give to young photographers who aspire to become professional photography?
Since I'm a little boy and going through all the museums and whatever in Europe, and not necessarily knowing, but you absorb an enormous amount of information because your brain is forming, it's and you can be very touched and influenced by beautiful art, beautiful music, beautiful things, whether it's for the eye, for the ear, and you form, not even knowing it, a kind of an archive in your head of all that information. And as you go along, and when you start to go toward being an artist, you have to realize that that's there, and you have to continue to feed your archive, which you do automatically, because when you stop in front of a beautiful painting or a beautiful photograph and you're touched by it, obviously you're there, and when you do your own artistry, let's say, your own vision, subconsciously or consciously, you have that there, okay? And I realized that when I was continuing to evolve in my photographic, artistic archive, I needed to look at more things. I needed to see what is the history of art, what is the history of photography, what is the history of music, even. And I went and I studied in the library, in exhibitions, etc. And I found that there were tons of great photographers that I had never even heard of. Okay, when I lived in America, when I came here, I started to learn a lot more about um, old time photographers who were pioneers, let's say, not just in the technical part, but in the visual part of doing things a new way, a different way uh, that had been done before. The first pioneers who I think were a lot of were from Czechoslovakia and from Russia and from Germany, came kind of out of the pictorialist movement, went from drawing to drawing on photographs and then pure photographs. And there were people like Rodchenko and Dritko, you know those people, Czech photographers, Sudek,
Yes, yes.
uh, August Sander in Germany, in America, Edward Weston, Walker Evans, and then there were lots of women photographers as well. Christina Broom and Margaret Borg White, Dorothea Lange, Lee Miller. Everybody was trying to show their vision. Do it another way. Do it their way. And for young people, you have to try to see your way. And all the things you see in museums, whether they're incredible paintings, I mean, in a painting, there's so much to see, not necessarily modern art that's, abstract or whatever, but still that can, but study the light and study the way he looks at things, the way a new way of trying to look at something, at least your own personal way of looking at something. It's not just a technical thing. It's a eyes. Your eyes must be the camera, and then you have to obviously adapt that to the film or to the digital image. But young people have to do that. They really must make their own library of what is beautiful, what is meaningful, what is poignant, what is it slaps you right in the face. Wow, you know. Not everybody can do that, but a lot of the things obviously you see in museums and stuff. I studied in college in film class. We studied a lot Eisenstein. His films. We saw most of his films in film school. Shot obviously in Odessa, the battleship Potemkin and stuff like that. I because I realized when I saw those older photographers, the pioneers I call them, because when you're in college, a lot of times when you moved to New York, you were seeing people like Avedon and Irving Penn, and which were very, very respectable photographers. But when you look back in the past, you see where they weren't the first ones to do that. They were there was many other people before who themselves had no photographic influences. The old timers, I mean. They were coming from painting and adapting painting to a new technique of capturing an image in time for eternity. But it's very important to do that, but it's important to do it your way, in your click. Voilà.